There are some doors you should never open. And there are some secrets that, once you know them, you can never unknow them. This is a story about a family that built their dream home on top of someone else's bones. And what lived with those bones is still there. In 1962, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Dorothy and Francis Baker moved into a brand new house. It wasn't just any house. Dorothy's own father and uncle had built it with their bare hands, just for her family. Two kids, Bobby and Robin, played in the yard every afternoon. Francis came home from work to a warm dinner. Dorothy had everything she had ever dreamed of. It looked like the perfect American life. But underneath that perfect life, underneath the floors, underneath the walls, underneath everything, was a secret. Before the house was built, workers were digging up the land to lay the concrete. And deep in the earth, they found something that stopped them cold. Human bones. Old bones. Nobody knew who they belonged to. Nobody knew how long they had been there. It was late in the year. Winter was coming fast. Stopping construction meant permits, police, investigations, months of delays. So the men made a decision. They left the bones exactly where they were, and they poured the concrete right over them. The Baker family was now living, eating, sleeping directly on top of an unmarked grave, and they had absolutely no idea. Not long after moving in, Bobby's grandmother came to visit, and one day she sat the children down and told them what the workers had found. She probably thought it was just an old story, something interesting to tell the grandkids. She had no idea what she had just set in motion, because something in that house was listening. Shortly after, young Bobby started noticing a man standing in the backyard, just standing there, perfectly still, next to the old tree near the fence. Bobby would call his parents. They would come to the window and look. Nothing, just a tree. But Bobby saw him every time, and there was something about that figure that made Bobby's stomach turn. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't someone passing through. Bobby just knew, the way children sometimes know things, that this man was not right. That something about him was deeply, fundamentally evil. Then the man stopped staying outside. One afternoon, Bobby was sitting near the basement heater vent when he heard something drift up through the grates. A voice, low and quiet and almost friendly. "Want to be my friend?" Bobby was just a little kid. Kids have imaginary friends. So he talked back. He visited that vent every day, having full conversations with whatever was on the other side. His mother, Dorothy, thought it was sweet, her imaginative little boy chatting away to himself near the furnace. She had no idea her son was talking to something that lived under the floor. It didn't take long for the friendship to turn. Bobby started having nightmares, the same one, over and over, every single night. A sheet would pull down tight over his face, pressing against his mouth, his nose, his eyes, cutting off his air completely. He couldn't move, couldn't fight back, couldn't scream. Just darkness and pressure, and the feeling that something was slowly suffocating him. He would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart slamming in his chest. His parents took him to the doctor. The doctor found absolutely nothing wrong. Bobby was a perfectly healthy child. But Bobby knew something the doctor didn't. Whatever was in that house wasn't just visiting him in his sleep. It was whispering to him while he was awake, encouraging him to hurt things, to be cruel, to do things he knew were wrong. Bobby could feel it like a physical pressure, a hand on his shoulder, pushing him. Bobby was terrified, but he was also a kid who had had enough. One day, he walked to the top of the basement stairs, heart pounding, fists clenched. and he shouted down into the dark, "Get out of my life! You are not welcome here! Leave me alone!" Silence. And then, nothing. The nightmares stopped. The figure by the tree disappeared. The voice in the vent went quiet. Bobby grew up, built a career as a child safety specialist, and by night, he ran a group called the Connecticut Paranormal Investigators. He thought the house was behind him. He was wrong. Almost 40 years passed. Bobby's father, Francis, developed Parkinson's disease and then dementia. In his final months, Francis started seeing things. Figures standing in corners, shapes sitting in chairs. He would grab his family's arms and warn them, "Don't sit there. Someone is already sitting there." They would look at the chair. It was empty. Francis passed away. And for the first time in nearly 50 years, Dorothy was completely alone in the house her father had built for her. That's when it came back. One night, Dorothy was lying in bed when she felt it. The foot of her mattress pressed down, slowly, heavily, deliberately, like someone had just sat down at the edge of her bed. She looked. The room was empty, but the weight was still there, pressing down, staying. Dorothy said afterward she knew immediately this was not Francis. This was not her husband coming back to comfort her. This was something else, something that had been in this house a very long time. She called Bobby the next morning, crying, "Bobby, something is in this house, and I don't think it ever left." Bobby moved his mother out that same week. Then he brought his team in. He also brought a woman named Mary Currian, a spirit sensitive who had worked on difficult cases before. The moment Mary stepped through the front door, she stopped walking. "There are multiple presences here," she said quietly. Bobby walked her through the house, room by room. Each space felt heavy, charged, wrong in a way that was hard to describe. Then, Bobby led her to the basement stairs. Mary went completely silent. The temperature had dropped sharply. The air felt thick, almost solid. Mary described what she was sensing, an overwhelming darkness below, something ancient, furious, something that did not want to be disturbed. And a figure, tall, dark, wearing a hood. Bobby felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He knew that figure. He had seen it as a 6-year-old boy, standing by the tree in the backyard. He had heard its voice whispering up through the heater vent. It had never left. It had just been waiting, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right opportunity. And now Dorothy was alone, and grieving, and vulnerable, and it had come back for her. Bobby called in Bishop Robert McKenna, one of the most experienced exorcists in the United States. The bishop arrived and began the rite of exorcism. The house did not go quietly. Almost immediately, a violent, invisible force slammed into Bishop McKenna near the cellar stairs. He stumbled hard, nearly went down the steps. The team grabbed him just in time. Mary was attacked too, pushed. She felt something rake across her skin. Whatever was in that basement was not afraid of a priest. It was not afraid of holy water or prayers or the cross. It was angry, and it was powerful, and it had been in this house for decades. Over the following months, Bobby's team returned again and again. Blessings, prayers, different rituals. Each time they thought they had made progress. Each time, something still felt wrong when they left. Finally, Bishop McKenna attempted one last method. He flooded every room with holy incense, thick, heavy smoke pushed into every corner, every closet, every crack in the walls and floor. If nothing else would drive it out, maybe this would. A week later, Bobby and his colleague Joe went back to check. They opened the front door and stepped inside, and it hit them like a wall. A crushing, suffocating pressure on their chests, like something enormous was sitting directly on top of them, squeezing the air out of their lungs. Their hearts began hammering. The pain spread through their chests, down their arms. They could not breathe. They grabbed each other and ran. Outside on the front lawn, doubled over, gasping in the cold air, Bobby finally understood. The exorcism had not weakened the demon. It had made it angrier. Bobby made the call that night. Dorothy would never go back inside that house. Her furniture, her photographs, 50 years of memories, all of it left behind. The house would be abandoned, and the bones that started all of this, still down there, still under the concrete, still unidentified, still unburied. Nobody knows whose they were. Nobody knows what they called into that house, or how long it had been waiting down there in the dark before the Baker family gave it a home. The house in Bridgeport still stands today. Nobody lives there. Nobody will. Whose bones were buried under that foundation? Were they the source of this evil, or just the reason it arrived? And why did it wait 40 years before coming back for Dorothy? Leave your theory in the comments. I want to know what you think. If this story kept you up tonight, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, if something lets me post it.